This is David from the Earth Medicine Academy, and I am here with definitely one of the most interesting people I've ever met. This is David Wei. He's one of our instructors at the Earth Medicine Academy, and he teaches Qigong and esoteric Chinese arts, I think. Well, hi, David. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. I'm always tickled when people say things are interesting because it takes me back to like Iron Chef days.
I didn't mean it that way. That's funny.
Only joking. I'm honored to be here. This is nearly a decade, close to a decade of us working together, and so um, it's really exciting for us to further this relationship and add value to people's lives through this
Yeah,
platform.
absolutely. Well, I love what you do, and being a Sinophile myself. So, want to tell us about your journey. How did you end up here, where you are? I mean, this is not your normal 9 to 5 life and job that you have. Tell us about that.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm a full-time career martial artist. Uh, we teach self-defense and culture, not so much in the sense of how many people I can fight and, if I can keep my wallet in the state of a mugging, but more so against self-defense against cancer, heart disease, diabetes, uh,
Wow.
which is a far bigger killer in our world. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we look at it in that scope. And this tradition comes from Wudang Mountain. I was fortunate enough to live there for 5 years and kind of train under monastic settings. And in that, I learned a lot of wonderful, wonderful views and practices that I've brought back to share.
Wow. How did you end up in Wudang? How did that transpire?
Well, Wudang, it's a Taoist pilgrimage point, and it's no different than Lhasa for Tibet or Mecca for Muslims.
Oh yeah.
It's a sacred pilgrimage point. So most every Taoist makes their way to Wudang in some form or another at some point in their practice. I initially got turned on to Wudang from the Wu-Tang Clan, right? It's a little hip hop rap group that I was into when I was in high school.
Huh.
And that's how I became aware. And then through Kung Fu movies, um, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, for example, main characters based out of Wudang. And so all of those instances kind of inspired me to pursue this as a practice and a path. And when I first went to Wudang, it was funny because, being Chinese, my mom's Chinese, they didn't know Wudang really existed. They thought it was a fairy tale.
Wow.
Yeah,
Huh.
because it's so mystical and so engrossed in lore. It's so famous, but almost to like legendary type. So when I was like, oh, I'm really going to Wudang Mountain, she goes, hold on, there really is a Wudang Mountain? And so, when I went, I saved up for a number of years to go for 3 months. And in that 3 months, I learned that there's other ways to live. And what I mean by that is we're all familiar with the narrative of go to school, get a job, have a family, retire, die. Like, we're all familiar with that narrative. Some of us more successful at it than others. But perhaps there are other ways of life available to us. And so that was a big goal of mine, is to go to China and explore my roots, explore my heritage, and look for a new way of being. And sure enough, I found it. And so I made it a point to stay out there for a good 5 years. At that point, though, I chose to leave because, enlightenment's easy on the mountain.
That's right.
Like, who are you?
I talking to your dad for a while,
Yeah. So, when you put yourself in the real shit, in the real muck of the earth, that's where you test the quality of your peace and your perseverance and, all these other spiritual values that we grow.
Yeah. Well, if there's anything we need these days, it's new ways to live, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how would you describe Taoism?
Uh, oh, no.
Yeah, me too.
Does that suffice?
Got it. Got it. Well, we'll just say for those that are unaware, Taoism is the old religion of China.
Yeah.
Inherent or originally shamanic and still quite shamanic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I can say about Taoism is that it's big and it's varied. And so the particular path that I explored was a spiritual martial path, cultivating the Tao through hard martial practice.
Mm-hmm.
In Chinese, we say, we shou Dao. And so the determination, the will, the perseverance, the integrity, the sincerity that you put towards your practice as a martial artist leads to a spiritual experience. And so I chose the martial path. But there's divination path, medical path, musical path, exorcism path, ritual path, devotional path, monastic path, hermitage path. You name it, Taoism has it. And
Yeah, Ming used to talk about philosophical and religious Taoism as being very different. Ming was you knew Ming, huh?
yeah, Lumi.
Yeah, yeah. Ming was a teacher of mine a long time ago.
Mm.
So how did you, when you were younger, could you feel an alignment with this path? Like when you were growing up?
Actually, yeah. When I was a youth, I was raised by a single mother in the hood. And so she kind of did her best, but I was all over the place. And fortunately, I found refuge in the Catholic Church.
Uh-huh.
And I prayed the rosary and I, did the Stations of the Cross, and I was an altar boy, and I was into it really early on.
Huh.
Because I was really in touch mystically. I really had this kind of relationship with a divine, if you will. And so I just looked for whatever medium I could find to access God. And so Catholicism was just there, right? And easily accessible. So I dove in and I was serious about my relationship with God through Catholicism. But, really early on, I was one of those problem kids in the church. Because I'd be like, why do we kneel? Why do we wear purple? Why do I see that? What does Amen mean? Why do these points for the, sign of the cross? Why? And then, the priests would get so annoyed with me. And they'd always give me such surface level answers. And me, even as a youth, I know that that's surface, give me something deeper.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it wasn't long before I lost faith. And, I did my little street hoodlum thing for a number of years, but in an attempt to find myself, my culture, I stumbled upon Confucius. And so here I am, 13, 14 years old, reading Confucius. And I really appreciated the short idioms, the short little chunks of wisdom that really resonated with me.
That's fascinating. So you got to Lao Tzu through Confucius. That's interesting.
Well, not quite.
Okay.
I was really sprung on Confucius, and I carried his Analects with me in my back pocket. And I was just always in my Confucius book. And then one of my teachers was like, yo, if you like Confucius, you'll love Lao Tzu. I'm like, oh, okay, check it out. And sure enough, those 81 chapters blew my mind. And so I got turned on to Taoism really early. And I had read the Tao Te Ching easily 100 times by the time I was in my teens.
Wow.
It's such an easy read, And
Where did you grow up?
Richmond, California.
Richmond, California. Wow.
Yeah, it's much nicer now. It's been recently gentrified.
Yeah.
But there's still some shady parts. However, when I went, it was regarded of the most dangerous places in the United States.
Wow.
There are other cities, DC, dangerous. Chicago, dangerous. Baltimore, dangerous. There are other places in the world, or specifically America, that are dangerous. But with regards to population and violent crime per capita,
Right.
Richmond was up there, top three. And so that was my environment. And so martial arts was kind of like a safe haven for me. It was kind of like a way for me to feel safe in a dangerous environment.
I can imagine. I was thinking about when you were talking about Catholicism that, I don't know if you're familiar with Thomas Merton, but the esoteric Christian mystical traditions in some ways are kind of similar to Taoism, to Taoist thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? The flying nun. Right?
That's funny.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, in the beginning there was the word, and the word was God, right? And that kind of translates from nothing came one, from one came two,
Yeah.
two, three. Like there's parallels.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think that Taoism has to offer the West now? Like, what are the really important pieces that we need to understand?
Um, you know, that's a big question. I think the biggest thing that I personally get from Taoism is reminding me that we have a baseline of humanity. And often when we get caught up in our obligations, our jobs, and our deadlines and whatnot, and we have all these hats and so forth, then we're no longer human. As soon as I step into the role of engineer, then I have to do engineer shit. And I may forget my human shit. Pardon me for cursing.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but if I get caught up in my engineer story, I may forget to eat well, sleep well, take care of myself with hygiene, good rest.
Hmm.
So caught up in this thing that needs to be done, and I need to be this, and I'm, because I'm an engineer, or because I'm a politician, because I'm a Black Lives Matter leader, because I'm a this. As soon as we put on these hats, then we're that, and we forget that we're human.
What does that look like for you? Like, in other words, if you were to, if I was in computer programming mode and then I was to reconnect with my humanity, what would that look like?
Well, computer programming mode, that might have you sit in front of a screen for several hours. That might have you sit in climate controlled conditions under false light for several hours of the day. Um, and humans, as I like to express, move. Humans
Right.
breathe fresh air. Humans get sunshine. Uh, and so when we can remember that we have a human aspect to ourselves, then we can express that human, and we can have the benefits of being human, i.e. healing, i.e. growth, i.e. connection. There's so much that's available to us as humans that maybe as a computer engineer, I don't have that access.
Right. So a computer engineer finding her humanity, she would do what? What would she, what direction would she move, or what would be different?
Um, Maybe getting up from time to time, having a stand-up desk, maybe going outside to do their work, maybe
Got it.
taking time to brew tea, maybe setting up structured hours so that we're not always in front of a computer, allowing time to rest well, eat well, sleep well, engage others well, socialize well.
Like all this stuff our grandmothers used to tell us to do: wash behind our ears and be nice and play
Yeah.
well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's common sense. Um, would you describe a little bit about Wudang Monastery, what you did there, and some of your instructors, your teachers?
Cool. Wudang Monastery could be better worded as Wudang Mountain.
Wudang Mountain. Okay.
Even better worded as Wudang Mountain Range, because it's not one peak, it's 72 peaks. Wudang Mountain Range is huge. And of the 72 peaks, you know, there's a number of temples and monastic hermitages and huts and caves and, you know, practice pavilions. And, you know, it's a beautiful, beautiful space full of practice. I stayed in a temple called Qigong, Empty Jade Palace. And it was a temple that was modeled after the Forbidden City. And it was considered like a palace for the emperor to come and visit from time to time. And it was modeled after the Forbidden City, like -2 inches on either side of the diameter, because
Really?
you can't be equal to or greater than.
Right, right.
Just a little bit.
2 inches. That's funny.
So even though it's modeled after the imperial palace, it's just a little bit smaller. Yeah. So at any rate, when I first went to Wudang, that was the temple that I went to, and it was located in the foothills of the mountain, so rather close to town. And it was all rural and rustic when I first went. And so dirt roads, farmer markets, you know, it was very, very country. And fortunately, I know how to speak a little bit of Chinese. Fortunately, I came at a good time of year. I came during the spring, summer. And so it was really easy to fall in love. Winters, bitter cold in the winters. But then average day there, say we train upwards of 10 hours a day on average.
Wow.
In the morning, we'd wake up and before breakfast, it's common to take a run. It's common to do Qigong, and that would often take about 2 hours. Then we'd have breakfast, we'd have a short break, then we'd have morning class. And that would often be 3 hours. We'd have a short break from there, enjoy lunch. Some of us take a siesta at that point, and then we'd have an afternoon practice for another 3 hours. And then we'd have a break for dinner. Then there's like another short time where we can take care of ourselves and, you know, do what we want to do for our own health. And then there'd be an evening, kind of like a meditation or a night practice, depending on the season. During fall, winter, it was colder, so we did a lot more meditation. During spring and summer, it was hotter, so we did a lot more movement.
Were the teachings didactic too, like lecture and memorizing information, or was it all physical?
All physical. And very often, if you had a question, my teacher would respond by saying, "Shut up and go train."
Ah, like my Hawaiian teachers say, "Why are you so niele? Why are you so nosy?" Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. And to tie in the Hawaiian tradition, there's a whole lot of ho'opili going on. And so just shut up, just observe, just go through the paces. Your questions.
They say nanakamaka ho'oloika pepeawa me pa'akavaha, means open your eyes, open your ears, shut your mouth. Yeah. Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about human beings moving. One of the interpretations of the word kanaka, which is person, is that which moves. So in Hawaiian.
Yeah, well, to that end, my teacher would often say, "There's no good questions." It's very distinct from our view. It's like the only question you had is the one you don't ask, right? Whereas there's no good questions. If you shut up and observe, you'll figure it out.
Huh.
But questions like, where should my foot go? Is this right? You know, if you practice, you'll figure it out. But if you're still a fledgling and you don't have body mechanics, you don't have coordination, if you don't understand weight shifting dynamics, yeah, where does my foot go? You know, but once you have coordination, once you have balance, once you have posture and mechanics, then your foot goes where it goes. And
do you discourage your students from asking questions? Because I mean, you're teaching in California.
It depends on what kind of mood I'm in.
Right.
I'm spicy, and I've already cussed several times in this interview. So I'm a spicy teacher. I make fun of people. I don't hit people like my teacher did. My teacher hit me. But outside of that, I will make fun of, I will point out, I will laugh at you, I will talk
Yeah.
shit. And so
So you
I
have
can,
to be thick-skinned to study with you.
yeah, but at the same time, like I'm a sweetheart, so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So again, it just depends on the mood I'm in, depends on the content that we're exploring, depends on the circumstance.
Mhm.
Am I teaching in an academic setting? Am I teaching in a movement setting? Am I teaching indoors? Am I teaching outdoors? Am I a guest? Am I a host?
Right, right.
Things, are taken into consideration relative to how
Contextual.
much of an asshole I am.
Right. um, During the Cultural Revolution, was the monastery you were at? I can't remember what you called it you. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. The was the monastery? Oh, yeah. Deficient Jade or Empty Jade, was that the name of it?
MPJ, yeah.
Empty Jade, yeah. The monastery you were at did that continue during the Cultural Revolution? Has it been continuous, or was there breaks in history? It
Destroyed.
was destroyed.
Yeah, it was destroyed. Mao was very thorough, and of those that endured cultural revolution, it's my understanding that the Taoists actually fared quite well, considering. And
Because they were already prepping.
um, the way that I understand it is when the Red Guard would come to a Taoist temple, the priest would put a picture of Mao on top of the altar. And then no soldier is going to tear down an altar dedicated to Mao. And
Brilliant.
Taoists, they don't give a fuck. Yeah, Mao. Yeah, that's Mao.
Yeah, he's the man. Wow. Wow.
And so in that way, the Taoist temples fared quite well. The folk religions, they're not going to do that. The ancestral halls, they're not going to do that. The Buddhists, they're not going to do that. But the Taoists, oh yeah, Mao, that's the homie.
Yeah, they weren't fundamentalists, which is one of the reasons I love Taoism so much. It's very much around having a systems view of reality rather than a dogma,
Yeah. And so in that looseness, they were able to survive. However, Wudang did get hit. A number of temples did make it, but the temple that I was in was ruins. And that was part of the appeal. I wanted to be in the old temple ruins.
Yeah. So obviously when the Cultural Revolution ended, how was it reestablished? Do you know that history?
Well, I kind of know a loose telling of it from my family experience, because during Cultural Revolution, my family fled from mainland China to Taiwan.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting. Huh.
My grandfather was a general under that Taiwanese dude, and he was really smart. And so had my family not run, there would be no me. And so after Cultural Revolution, there was a brief period of kind of reacclimating. And then there was a cultural revival where they realized, oh, maybe some of Chinese culture is actually good. And so they instilled modern wushu, where they started to reintegrate movement practices, at the very least for the scope of civil health, right? There's a Confucian view of I practice as my contribution to society. My cultivation, my health, my wellness, my awakening, my growth. That's how I serve, because I need less resource. I'm not a burden. I'm not needy. And so my contribution is being self-sufficient, right? And so the Cultural Revolution, there was this instance of getting everybody together and practicing, right? And by and large, it was military. You'd have military officials come and lead these big groups. And that's why you see today Shaolin, for example, or large sports academies. They'll have thousands of people all lined up, all in sync, all moving together. That's not traditional.
Interesting.
That's military.
Huh.
Right. And everyone has to do the same thing. Everyone has to move the same way. So that means if you're going to fit this cookie cutter, you have to be a particular body type, particular age group, particular everything. Right. And then so that was kind of the cultural revival. And then so speaking of Ming, also my teacher, he said, careful with the word traditional, because chances are you're not inheriting a tradition. Chances are you're inheriting a trauma. And a lot of these old masters are hard on their students because their master was hard on them. And their master was some military official, getting everybody to go through the ropes.
Even in Tibetan practice, in the Tibetan traditions, the Naropa or whoever beating up his student, or Talopa, I can't remember who they are, but yeah.
Yeah, and so in that way, a teacher will teach a student hard because they themselves were trained hard, and that's just what they know.
Mm.
It's less of inheriting a tradition, more of inheriting a trauma.
Mm.
So it's an interesting view of the impact of cultural revolution.
Have you, this is a little bit personal, and it's obviously answering it's optional, but how have your traumas in your life influenced your practice now?
I'm happy to answer that, actually, because there's one specific trauma that I endured amidst my time in China. And something really, really intense happened to me, and it happened here in America, California, while I was away in China. And it really left me devastated because there was nothing that I could do from China to address it. And so I was just kind of sit there and just be stuck in the experience of it.
Wow.
And so for several months, I had a really hard go. And I couldn't punch or kick because I was too angry. It's too much rage. I couldn't do Qigong because my emotions were too unstable. I couldn't meditate because every time I close my eyes, I get visions and flashes of the instance. All I could do was Bagua circle walk.
Interesting.
And so if you're familiar with Bagua,
Yeah.
you have this, you just kind of walk in a circle. And so I literally for 10 hours a day, I would walk in this 8-step circle, counting my steps. I did over 10,000 steps a day. And I did the math. It was upwards of 7 miles.
Wow.
8-step circle I would walk.
Uh-huh.
And if I ever missed my count, I'd just start over again. That's
fascinating.
It helped me with my trauma because it gave me something to do, gave my mind something to do. Okay, just count. Okay, just step, and that frame gave me, I didn't have the rage from my martial practice. I didn't have the emotional stuff from my Qigong practice. I didn't have the visions from my meditation practice. It was enough to give me something to do and to occupy my mind. And then the more I walked that circle, it was almost like a container or a vessel for my heart.
Yeah.
And then the more I walk that circle and I identify this circle as my container, then, sorry, I'm welling up as I recall the experience.
Yeah.
Then I was able to see the thing within my container from all the different angles. And it helped take me out of my victimhood and put me into a place of witness. And I was able to see the scenario from multiple points of view and see how the impact was bigger than just my experience, but everyone had their own pain relative to the trauma. And that kind of leveled it for me. And it was a great number of months that I walked that circle so much, crying, just trying to bear with my experience, that I literally carved a path into the tile of the temple.
I'm sure it's still there. You know,
It is.
yeah.
We've gone back. We've gotten there. I said, that's my
American, you know.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're familiar with the cartoon character Scrooge McDuck.
No.
Donald Duck, you know, Donald Duck.
Oh, yeah.
Duck has that rich uncle. But in his cartoon, he had this like little pacing room where he would pace in a circle and literally like carved a path into the floor. And so, you know, that kind of made me laugh when I'd go back. And then years later, through several seasons and through several, you know, progressions of the place, that path was still there.
You're now officially an icon. You know, it's interesting. The when you were talking about, you know, Bagua, I've been really interested in fascia lately and how the fascia works in the body. And the fascia is actually liquid-filled tubules in the body. And some people that think that that's how acupuncture works, that the fascia acts as like a microcircuit, like a feedback loop that's different from the nervous system. But Bagua is so torqued that it works the fascia much more than almost anything else I can think of. Like all that torsion.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that wasn't part of your healing, like you instinctively chose that and knew that because the trauma is stored in the fascia and muscles, you know, at least that's current perspective on it. So that's interesting.
Well, that is an interesting thought. I hear you on the fascial lines and tendon lines being torqued and spiraled. But I think the bigger part for me was posture and breath. And, through the practice, you know, proprioception, body intelligence, body awareness within a space. These are really important things. And so whenever I found myself in the pit of my pain or in the peak of my frustration, either end of the spectrum, I'd have enough body awareness to feel what my body was doing amidst that space. And so if I'm in my pit, I'm probably hunched over, my chest caved in, my head down, breath really shallow. If I'm in my rage, then maybe my shoulders are back, my chest is up, also breath really shallow. And then find myself in any of those spaces, I would, one, first and foremost, change my posture. And then I would, two, change my breath.
Interesting.
And it would suck, right? Because I want to be in my experience.
Right.
Then consciously change my posture, change my breath. 3 to 5 minutes later, the mood would change also. Later, I would come to find out that that method has been named somatic psychology.
That's exactly. And the process of doing that is called interoception, where we're noticing sensations in our body. We're actually going to be doing a class on that, Jenna Harrison and I, at the Academy. That's wonderful, man. That is so much discipline. That's very impressive.
Well, somebody likes my answer. Debbie, you like my answer? 1107.
Devi, yes.
That was long.
She was responding to your the way you define Taoism.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So do you have plans for I know you have students in California and you travel a lot and teach. Do you have things coming up that you're excited about?
With regards to teaching, everything is now virtual due to circumstance. That was a rough shift for me.
I bet.
We are an oral tradition. We are a hands-on, in-person transmission. My teacher said that Tai Chi is taught with 4 hands. meaning my two and your two. So Tai Chi needs to be felt, it needs to be experienced. Tai Chi and Qigong isn't something that we can understand analytically. And so now I really understand why my teacher would tell me, shut up and go train. Because oftentimes when we think we understand something, it may make sense up here, but it doesn't always translate to here. And so it was really tough for me to transition to online teaching because now there's no contact.
Right. How are you doing with that?
We're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah.
It's still a journey. But if I were to teach breathing, before I would have you put your hands on my ribs. I'd have you put your hands on my kidneys, and I'd have you feel breath in my body. If I were to teach posture, I would stand and have you push against me and then feel the structural integrity of my posture. And so there's a lot of hands-on things that are just no longer available in the light of Zoom online virtual classes.
which is not a great. David's going to be teaching a class through us online, so I guess, but we'll figure it out, as you say.
It'll be fine. Yeah, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
I've honed in a curriculum that I think translates pretty well. However, with regards to future plans, I think I'm just going to be working on this and helping to better my voice online. But for my personal endeavors, I'm going to be a father soon.
You're kidding me.
Yeah,
awesome.
Everybody's locked down, so they're just fucking and just popping babies out. I have a huge population boom next year.
Wow. Oh, that's wonderful, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How soon?
We have 3 more months. Wife officially hit the 6-month mark, and she is hella pregnant. And so
I bet.
That's something for me to look forward to. Aside from that, there is, and then this is relevant to you, we're looking to move to Oahu.
Oh, that's exciting. I'd love to have you in the archipelago. That would be great.
Yeah.
Do you know when?
Yeah, once this baby pops out, the goal when we first found out that we were pregnant, we were trying to get there then. But then with the whole, lockdown COVID fiasco, it made it very challenging for us to get out of our state here in California.
Well, maybe we can set up some classes for you on Maui. That would be awesome. Some in-person classes. It's great.
With my arm. Get me to Maui? No. That's my sarcasm coming up.
Yeah. I had a couple. Well, I was wondering. The two things I was wondering about was in terms of interoception in your Taoist meditations and practices. I was wondering, are there any internal meditation practices that relate to emotion? I know there are Tibetan practices, but that relate to navigating emotion specifically that you can think of?
Yeah. Maybe not so much stillness, but we do have a sequence called the 8 shakes.
Huh?
And there are several postures that we would assume, and then just kind of shake your body out.
That's awesome.
And there's particular tones that you would make in addition to the posture, in addition to the shake. And you would just shake for the duration of your exhale, right? And so one of the movements is a wild goose, okay? And wild goose would have your hands out to the side. And this is specifically for lungs, right? And lungs is specifically for sadness, sorrow, grief.
Grief, right.
So when someone finds themselves in that space of sadness, then we'd have them open up. And this in and of itself is going to be so nourishing for someone who's sad, right?
Yeah.
So we'd open up, we'd take a big breath, fill in the lungs, and then shake, making an ah sound. And the reason why we do the ah sound is because if you hold your hands to your chest and go ah, you'll likely feel the resonance. And so we're shaking outside and we're shaking inside relative to the specific emotion that we're navigating at the moment.
That's fantastic.
If someone has anger, then we do the liver. If someone has worry, then we do the spleen. If someone has fear, we do the kidney, right? And then so relative to the emotion, we have a particular shake and a sound to help release that and to keep it moving, right? Because good circulation, good health. And so an emotion that gets stuck is no different than a lymph node that gets stuck, or whatever gets stuck. Stuck sucks.
Yeah.
So we just want to move and flow through the experience. And so if we're stuck in our sadness, then move the sadness. If you're stuck in your fear, then move the fear. And so
that's fantastic. The original in nature, that's how animals resolve traumas. They shake. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, it's why zebras don't have ulcers.
That's right. That's right. Robert Sapolsky.
But even when I was a teacher of special ed, and I worked specifically with aggressive youth, and there'd be instances where these kids would have an experience, and one in particular, this young man named Kevin, he would just hold himself and rock, and he would console himself by rocking. And sure, a rockabye baby, and it brings us back to our experience in security and safety of the womb.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so it's very natural, it's very human, and it's an important thing to release the emotion. Otherwise, it gets pent up, and that creates all kinds of issues: physical, emotional, spiritual, karmic, familial, social, the like.
Was that is that something you had planned on teaching in your class with us? No,
No.
I'd love to put you on the spot and think about doing a class on, because we're doing a yoga informed trauma class. I would love to do a Qigong informed trauma class.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. A little bit of a warning then. In the Taoist view of trauma, we don't care. We don't care. So I'll do it. But if people expect to be coddled or
No, I get the feeling you're not the coddling kind of guy. So no.
Because any of that, affirming or caring, tending to, in the Taoist view, it just further reinforces the story.
Right.
It keeps it real. The more you attach to it, the more you speak on it, the more you share it, it just keeps it real. And so the Taoist approach to trauma is like, fuck your trauma. I don't care about your story. What do you do, right? So again, you have sadness, this is what you do. You have fear, this is what you do. And we have tools, we have coping mechanisms. It's less of here's a safe place.
Right. Well, we can create appropriate caveats for the class, so people will select out and select in depending on what they're looking for. So that's awesome. God, this has been great. I really enjoyed talking to you. Let's see. Well, I'm going to open it up to questions. Does anybody have any questions for David? And if not, that's okay. If not, I got plenty of stuff I can talk about. So,
how about Harriet? Your mic's on. Let's hear from Harriet.
I was talking to Harriet. Harriet is one of our instructors. She teaches. I've forgotten the name of her class, and if I call her an astronomer, she's going to get angry with me. No, but what is the name of our class, Harriet?
Called the
put your video on, please.
Oh, I thought my video. There it is. Okay. There it is. Okay. My class is called The Intimate Sky.
That's it. I knew that. Intimate Sky, yes. Would you describe the class for us?
Oh, gosh. It's about indigenous relativity.
Indigenous relativity, cool.
Yes, relativity existed long before Einstein, but it got paved over by Homo industrialis. Relativity is about relationships.
Mhm.
Relationships with your body, relationships with the sky, relationships with animals, plants. Yeah. Relativity is
Harriet teaches experiential astronomy. That's the best way to describe it. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Bless you. That's very helpful. Yeah. Because the word astronomy conveys remote, impersonal, has nothing to do with your life. And I know that's not where the Taoists were coming from.
Mm.
One of my first students, when I first started teaching astronomy at MCC, was a fellow who had studied in China. He had studied Oriental medicine, but it was a course for Westerners. And because it was for Westerners, they kind of scaled it down and they eliminated the astronomy part. But he knew that to really practice, Chinese medicine, he needed the astronomy part. So he took a class with me, and it was really interesting for me because it got me thinking about, oh, uh, medicine, yeah,
yeah.
health.
David, you correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that, the small intestine points on the scapula are named after stars, and that some of these Taoist practices that align those points to the stars, including by way to Hokupa'a, which the Hawaiians call the North Star. Do you know anything about that?
That's news to me.
Oh,
That's news to me. We have footwork patterns that trace celestial bodies.
interesting.
I've heard about those. And you actually walk the pattern on the ground as it is in the sky.
Mhm.
Oh, I would love to know more about that. If you have anything, do you have any suggestions on where I could go to learn more about that? Because that's the above below, yeah? As above, so below, I think.
Yeah, look up Lindsay Way. No relation, but
Okay, 1 second, let me, L-I-N-D, can you spell that?
yeah, Lindsay, Lindsey, because
What?
yeah,
Way?
and then Way, same as mine, Wei.
Okay,
We have the exact same name, but no relation. And her and I both spent a number of years in Wudang. But remember, I said it was a range. And so while I was on one side of the range, she was on the far west side of the
oh,
range.
right.
And her experience was way, like mine was rustic, but hers was way more rustic. And so she got the real deal. And she still goes back and has strong relations. And so, and she does a Bagua pattern that traces all the stars.
Well, could you tell me that, Bagua, could you tell me how to spell that? I never knew the name. I've just heard bits and snatches.
B is in Bob, A
Mhm.
is in Apple, G is in golly,
Yeah.
UA, Bagua.
Okay, and Bagua is the term for walking the constellations on the ground?
No, Bagua specifically means 8 gates. Maybe you've seen the Chinese, they're very fond of these, red octagon stop signs. And
Yes.
oftentimes it'll have a mirror in the middle and like these lines along the edges. That's called the Bagua. And it's related to the I Ching, which is related to binary code, yin yang. It's a fundamental system for understanding reality.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Great.
thank you so much.
David, Devi was asking about Qigong and plants,
Mm-hmm.
or Qi and plants. I know I've done a little bit of studying of Qigong with plants, but would you elaborate on that? Do you know of any practices or anything like that?
Yeah, there are a lot of practices with trees
Hmm.
specifically,
Right.
where it's common to befriend a tree and to establish a relationship with a tree, to which you would do standing meditation with, you would sit under, you would breathe with, and in some practices you would even hit your body against. These are all very common tree practices. In Wudang, there is a big herbal pharmacopoeia practice. And so, not so much in our school, but in other schools at Lindsay Way, for example, they would routinely go out and harvest the wild herbs on the mountainside. And so,
Kind of folks. That's great. My kind of people.
yeah. And the reason why I never chose to learn that is because I figured, oh, those are wild harvested herbs specific to the region. And so I knew that at some point I would leave. And so I figured, why learn Wudang herbs if I'm not going to be in Wudang?
Right.
I chose to omit that teaching. But Lindsay got it. And they would routinely go out. They can, name all the plants and know when's a good time to harvest, when's a bad time to harvest. They know all the medicinal properties and whatnot.
You know if there were gathering protocols? Did you ever talk about that?
I'm sure there were.
Oh.
I'm sure there were. I'm sure they gather with relation to the moon cycles. But again, that wasn't my specialty, so I can't speak too much on it.
Got it. Awesome. Well,
if I could speak a little bit more about.
Oh, please, yeah.
Because the way that I'm reading the question is about qi and plants, right? And so there is something I could say about qi.
Please.
This will be a nice thing to wrap up on and give people a feel for my flavor. Qi is bullshit. Qi, sure, there's something, and many cultures of all times have recognized an ether or a prana or whatever kind of energy, right? But in our Taoist view, my teacher would just speak of qi as relationships, right? And so earlier you spoke of fascia being a transmitter, right? But if you were to dissect the body, there's no meridian. Right? There's no meridian to take out and observe. But what there's tendon fascia lines, and there are relationships. And so my teacher would speak to qi as relationship. How well your skeletal system, your vascular system, all these various systems, how they all work together, how fluent are they? Right? Then when you have good coordination and good connectivity between varied systems, okay, good qi. But if there's disruption, stagnation, poor coordination, poor harmony, bad qi. So it's less of a
It's not a thing. It's a relationship. That's fascinating. Does that also apply to? Oh, I'm sorry. Go on, Harriet.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I got so carried away. Thank you. No, that explains so much. The interactions between the parts is like more parts. It's why 2 can add up to 7.
Yeah.
If the relationships are good.
Yeah. Oh, did you just drop an Enneagram reference, 2s and 7s?
No, I wasn't thinking about the Enneagram. I don't know much about it except that it exists. I was quoting from Western science, the interaction. Western science is finally getting around to understanding what you're talking about. And they describe it in their own jargon. Their jargon is the interactions between the parts is like more parts. Western science generally ignored the interactions. They just divided everything up into parts and pieces.
Yeah.
And now they're realizing, oops, can't do that. It doesn't work.
And they're very bad at describing relationships between things.
Yeah, no, they took a divide and conquer approach to things and had everything all divided into these separate little categories and cubbyholes. But anyway, so now they're finally saying the interactions between the parts is like more parts, which is kind of what I heard David saying with a great deal more depth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we are an eclectic bunch. David was talking about the Enneagram. So anyway, David is going to be teaching a Qigong class and a non-coddling, trauma-informed Qigong class at some point in the near future. I believe I don't remember the date. My bad, but we will be sending out information on that soon. Any final thoughts, David?
Sure. Just a moment ago, I said qi was bullshit. Another conversation is Qigong is bullshit.
All right.
I'm gonna teach a class of bullshit with you guys. It'd be great.
It's reframing. It's all reframe. It's like you said, when you're in the circle, you're looking at things from different angles, so we don't get stuck in this thing. Chi is not a thing. My trauma is not a thing. It's relationships.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been marvelous. Thank you, Harriet, Devi, and Tom. Stay tuned. Next month, we will have another Call of the Wild. Aloha.